I would like to just remind everybody and myself about what an incredibly democratic country we live in. I'll get to the other part later. When I talk to people who have come from other countries and here, and that we even have the privilege to vote as individuals, and me as a woman and all that, it keeps me awake at night. It makes me crazy about, you know, how far we are along from many other places, all the opportunities. The problem that we're facing now with the government that we have, particularly in power, is they have allowed themselves to rule with more power, more greed, more for self than it is for everybody. And we're talking about stifling people's creative abilities, not being realistic about climate change, and not being realistic about what we absolutely need to do right now to help people. A caring government who respects everybody and really, really wants everybody to be healthy and feel well would be immediately legislating better food programs and clean energy. All of that stuff would be happening. So that to me is the biggest flaw right now, where people are extremely confused about what they're supposed to do when they look at a party and a party platform. It would be really, really nice to just trust the individual that you vote for who represents your community. And that's one of the nice processes that we have, that we can feed it down to a city, a provincial, a government level, that we have that freedom to do it. So encouraging that more and more, that will create a democratic, that's the most democratic thing you can do, is vote for individuals that you trust and you believe in. So I think the answer to that one is with everybody here as to how democratic our government's going to be.
The last few years have been a disgusting display of contempt for democracy, contempt for Canadians. We had a system that worked. When the government went too far and stopped adhering to the rules of Parliament, stopped listening to the will of the people, and just started taking them for granted, the people would change government. That was democracy. We would rise up and we would get rid of that party. For some reason, Canadian people are sitting around and allowing the Harper government to get away with this. And it's up to us, everybody in this room, to say no, we've had enough. The only way to correct this problem is to get rid of the Harper government. That has worked for our history, and it will work again, but we need to stand up and be counted. We need to do it. We can't just blithely let it happen to us, which is what we're doing right now. The fact that the Conservatives are still leading in the polls nationally is just amazing to me after everything they've done over the past months. So it is up to us. Democracy in Canada works. The checks and the balances we have here are that the worst that can happen is that usually somebody can get 4 or 5 years of government, but if they abuse that power, Canadian people will change the government. And that's what we need to do. And that's how democracy will continue to work. Thank you.
This question comes from Keith, and I guess because our Conservative candidate's not here, I can ask it on behalf of Keith. What Harper bill receives priority to reverse?
Well, yeah, I want to answer the question that was asked, and that's one thing. So I'm going to just give you my own opinion. There are 3 things that the Liberal government would cut, and we all know that they are the Jets, corporate tax cuts, but also American-style mega prisons and their crazy American-style law and order bill that they're trying to put through. And for me, that's the thing I would cut first. Mega prisons are a failed experiment in the United States. Every state that has them knows it was a mistake to do it in the first place. If you ask anybody in California, they say don't do it. And for some reason Harper still thinks, oh, let's do it up here. He's in love with the Americans so much, he wants to take their bad ideas. So that's the first thing that I would do away with. But you know, the list is so long, and we're challenged here because where do you begin and where do you end with these guys?
I'm going to say ditto to that. In terms of the question, it's a strange question, asking what Harper should have reversed. Yeah, we're clearly, I think I've been very clear about what I feel that government in general has done, trying not to point the finger at the one, but from an ethical policy perspective, as far as I'm concerned, the Conservative government has undone a lot of progressive, positive things for people and have just not done enough to help and care and show that care and protection to everybody. So that's pretty overwhelming. If we actually got into power, we'd change an awful lot of things. So I'll let Adriana handle this.
I'm not going to stick to one. It's just impossible. Yeah, I'm cheating, but you didn't stick to one either, so there. And it's really hard to argue with Jet's corporate tax cuts and mega prisons, though you did support the tax cuts. You just want to reverse them now, which is fine. Those are big ticket items, very, very, very negative. I'm thinking a lot on two fronts. One is a lot of the environmental initiatives that Harper has cut, eco-energy, the renewable energy tax credit, and just the Harper climate change stance in international negotiations has just got to go. But in addition to that, just a couple little simple things that seem very trivial but are actually very, very profound. One is the Navigable Waters Act, where he took out protections for our waters that most of us drink from. And the other one is protection for women, and took out employment equity in the national government and the mandate for status of women for equality. Those are really simple things, but they're very, very profound and have very negative effects.
Sorry, I just wanted to add context since we're bashing Harper. What he's done to, she made a great point about what he's done to women and equality for women's rights in this country. He did that before the last election. And it's another example of us forgetting and giving up on something that is as devastating as that. He basically, it comes down to a minority right. Even though women are a minority, but we treat them like that in this country, and it's unfortunate. And that is a great point, Adriana. Thank you.
Next question. How is your party going to deal with the deficit and the debt that Canada carries? Maybe we'll start with Marie.
I'd love our party to represent this country well enough to be able to undo a lot of it. I think, you know, there has been a lot of overwaste on healthcare because of the lack of resources given to prevention. You know, looking into that, looking at giving people good, sustainable jobs in renewable, new energy, alternative jobs, that kind of thing. There's this whole world of new economy that can be created if we just start looking at having to put resources into alternative energy, like solar panels and efficient systems for every new home that's built. So really at this stage, we would be talking about new things that would be brought in. It's the deficit alone, as far as I'm concerned, as wacky as this sounds, I think, money is just money and it just sits there, and we're all humans and we all play on the same field here. So while there's debt and there's not, there should be a lot more openness, trust, ability, and capability as a species that clearly dominates this world right now to find new ways of communicating, eliminating debt just by virtue of forgive and forget and move forward. We seem to have a lot of problems with that. Certainly our government now has a lot of problems with that, but we are talking about a quantum shift in the way we could be thinking and caring and that sort of thing. So it's a pretty big answer for us, but that's where I would stand right now.
Before we talk about how we're going to get rid of this deficit, let's just remind everybody that this deficit occurred 6 months before the economic crisis hit Canada. On April 17, 2008, we were in a structural deficit of $56 billion. The economic crisis hit in October. This government mismanaged our money, and then they get away with it by saying, oh, we had to do that because of the crisis. Well, they didn't. They were bunglers when it comes to money. And the myth that conservatives are good with money is appalling. If you just look around history, you look at George Bush, Reagan and Bush, huge deficits. and then Clinton comes in and balances the budget. And then you got Bush, huge deficit. You got Mulroney, massive deficit. Liberals come in, balance the budget. $13 billion surplus that we handed to the Conservatives. And the first thing they did was take away the $3 billion buffer in case of bad times. They said, oh, things are going to be good forever. Let's get rid of that. And that's what put us into deficit. There was no room for error. The first thing we will do is cut the fighter jets, the corporate tax cuts, and the mega prisons. That all told adds up to close to $50 billion. And spread over some time, so it's not going to get rid of the deficit all at once. But that right away takes a huge chunk out of our deficit. And then what we need to do is be better fiscal managers. When the Liberals were in power, every department had a check and balances process where they would make sure that they were getting rid of waste, and they would regularly adjust department spending and cut waste and cut the fat off. The Conservatives, who are supposed to be the ones that want smaller government, cut that out, and government has tripled in size under them. These guys are bad with money. They're bad with our money. So that's how the Liberals would begin. We make government more efficient, get rid of the unnecessary excessive spending, and that in a very short time would get rid of our deficits and start getting rid of our debt. Thanks.
I agree with that. I'm going to challenge Marie. Sorry, you're so sweet. but she is. Sorry. It's true that money is just paper, but it's also true that somebody calls in those debts eventually, and we do have to pay them. And one of the things that I've thought for a long time is that it would be unconscionable to burden our children, in addition to having a despoiled environment and all of the effects that that will have, all of the economic effects of that, to burden them with an unmanageable debt burden on top of it all. In addition to that, it needs to be said that our debt burden in the past has caused us great grief. The IMF does step in at some stage and demand there be structural changes to the economy, and that is in no small way responsible for things like our healthcare cuts in 20 years ago. So we cannot allow ourselves to get into huge deficit. That would be very, very wrong. The Green Party platform does actually have the fastest elimination of our debt. 2.6 billion in the first year, 4 billion in subsequent years. And that's very important to us. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so it's 9 o'clock, and that's the time we said we would end. I'm going to check in with you, John, because you guys have done a terrific job answering a lot of questions. And I know not everybody's question has been answered, but we did get through a lot of them. So we're going to keep our word and wrap this up at 9?
Well, would anybody object if I asked if they want to take 15 more minutes of questions? Would anybody be offended by that? Would you take another 15 minutes of questions?
How about we do one more from me, one more from Jen, and then wrap it up? Sound fair? Okay. Because we all like to keep our word, right? All right, this question comes from Stephen. And we are literally just reading your questions off the cards, just so you know. This riding has a high influx of new immigrants. What programs will you put in place to help them become successful Canadians and tax-paying Canadians?